Welcome back to Homerbound, a podcast where a couple of big old nerds read through and discuss Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. I am Llama.
I'm Wriste, and I love Homer's Odyssey.
Did it sound like Homered? Look,
to my ear, anyway. We'll leave that
I've
up
been
to
discussing
viewers.
a little with Wriste that it's been a long day for me. So, words can be difficult, and this might just be one of those times.
Yeah, and of course, rest assured, off camera, I am like perfectly empathetic and concerned and stuff like that. But on air, I might make fun of it a tiny little bit. Just for fun.
Completely fair game. I'm a little bit loopy.
But know that I empathize completely with Llama's medical plight, even as I will sometimes make fun of it.
It's true. So I feel like we've even maybe mentioned this, that I do the reverse blush. The
one that I brought up
pale
jokingly.
Yeah, exactly. So I had a particularly pale, pasty day. But it's good. We're here now. We're about to do another wonderful, wonderful episode of the Odyssey. After our last episode with Scott Rubin, which was just awesome.
Yeah.
A really, really fun conversation.
Well, we'll try to get him on again.
Yeah, I do think we're going to try and get him on again, so everyone can look forward to that. I am certainly looking forward to it myself, because again, super fun conversation, super fun guy. But before we hop into things truly, and I mess too much else up, let's go with our little content warning. We are immature little child-minded adults. Look, I said already. It's gonna be.
I didn't say anything. You're good to.
No,
you're
you
clear
made
for
a
takeoff.
face. You made a face.
There's
you
no
all
proof of
can't
that.
see this because this is audio. The proof of it is that I'm saying it. So we have the minds of children. We laugh at immature things. We say immature things. We use naughty words. The Odyssey has adult content in it. There's violence. There's adults doing adult things with each other in the realm of hugging and kissing and beyond. And all
beyond.
all of these are things that you should know by now if you've gotten to this point, which I hope you've listened to all of the episodes if you've gotten to this point.
For those of you just tuning in now on episode 19.
Yeah, exactly. So, there's our little content warning. Be advised, listener. But once again, I hope you will join us for yet another day in this Odyssey. See what I did there?
I do see what you did. And as always, we recommend. Oops, that was my phone. I
recommend turning off your phone.
I don't usually have my phone on, but today was a special occasion. But yeah, we recommend reading along with us. If you haven't read this part, we encourage you to stop listening and start reading. We are currently reading the Emily Wilson translation of the Odyssey. It's very nice, very readable. So yeah, give that a check, and come on back when you're ready.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, someone listening to this will take enough away from it if you haven't read this translation, or perhaps if it's been a while since you read the Odyssey and you don't remember, much about it. But I can't recommend highly enough that you do kind of maybe refresh yourself and read along with us, because I've been getting so much out of it. I know you have as well, and I can only imagine that our listeners would, get an equal amount of benefit from that.
Or we can just be the world's slowest spark notes. If you have an exam on the Iliad and the Odyssey in, say, 6 months,
oh no,
you're ready.
Oh no. I don't think I would, I feel like a really bad source of actual knowledge for the Iliad and the Odyssey. Not that, we haven't, I think, gone for further than your average.
More like for recap purposes, right? If you want to know what's going on, you could listen to the to all 24 episodes and walk away with, okay, that's what happened in those books. It just be like
I think that's I think that's fair.
Slimy drip. Yeah.
Oh, I like the slow burn way more than I like the slimy drip. In any case, speaking of recaps, let's do a brief little recap of what we went over last time when we had Scott on, which was a really fun episode because we got to talk about Book 11, which is The Dead, which is Odysseus is continuing to tell his tale to Alcinous and Arete. And he tells the story of how Circe guides him into the underworld, all of the hordes of the dead, as Scott kind of jokingly mentioned, the parade of women. You have the fallen heroes, Agamemnon and Achilles, and you don't really hear from him, but you see Patroclus. And then, Odysseus gets to talk to his mother. I'm doing all of these completely out of order. I'm just remembering, people,
lots of dead people
whom he sees. Lots of dead people. And then, of course, towards the end, the dead people surround him, and he's like, holy crap, I gotta get out of here. My mom's here to pick me up. I gotta go. And then we got into Book 12, Difficult Choices, where Odysseus returns to Circe's island after having gone through the underworld, and Circe's like, oh crap, you're still alive. And she gives them the directions for the rest of their journey, which is to go by the sirens, plugging the men's ears with wax. Odysseus gets to be strapped to the boat and listen to the song. They get to choose between the Wandering Rocks or Scylla's Cave. People die, lots of people die. And then they also killed the sun god's nicest cow after being explicitly told not to do so. Well, they are told not to kill the cows, but it specifically mentions them killing his nicest cow.
Yes. But it's also like all of his cows.
Yeah, he's very unhappy about it. And
the mooing beef.
The zombie mooing beef on skewers. And they get wrecked because Helios asks Zeus to wreck them. And Odysseus is, thrown into the sea amongst the wreckage of the ship, manages to hang on to a piece of it and make it to Calypso's island. And this is where he stops telling his story. And this is where we find ourselves at the beginning of Book 13, Two Tricksters.
Yeah. Before we move on, this is something that I can't remember which book it was now that I'm thinking about it, but it stood out to me a while ago. And it's, I guess before we leave this part of Odysseus's story, I want to mention it because we're only a little more than halfway through the book, but Odysseus makes it back, like, now, pretty much.
Yeah, I was going to mention this too, actually, because it, my memory of, the first time of reading the Odyssey, I'm pretty sure I just quit reading it at this point. And it was just like, okay, I got through the cool stuff. He's back on the island now. This is all boring again. There's no Cyclopses, and I'm tired of it. Now, granted, I was, probably 12 years old when this happened or something like that, but I just remember, being like, okay, the cool fantasy part is over. I'm going to move on to another book.
Yeah, actually, I was telling my roommate about what books we were reading this episode, and he said the same thing. I don't know if he's read the Odyssey or if he's read it recently, but I told him, this is the part where Odysseus gets back to Ithaca, gets back to his home. He said, oh, you're almost done. Like, no, we're just about...
No, it's halfway through.
Yeah. But there was a part that we sort of glossed over that I didn't really think about until just recently. This was the part where Odysseus gets real mad and he throws the discus really far.
Yeah.
And Athena marks how far off he was and sort of talks him up. Like, oh, wow, look how cool this is. Like, he threw it so far. A blind man could tell that he's outthrown everyone. And the text described Odysseus as being glad that, I can't remember what specifically it said, but the text described him as being glad that someone friendly was around. I don't think you even talked about that. We mostly just talked about how, there's Athena again.
Well, we did mention and talk a little bit about throwing the discus and all of that, but I don't think we did in that context.
Yeah, and so some things from my personal life, as I've mentioned, I think a few times, I have a roommate, I have other roommates, but my main roommate buddy, I've known him for like a decade, which doesn't seem like too long, but for me it is, because like I got to know him when I moved for the first time. I moved states when I was like 15, and I got to know him a couple years after I arrived, and we've just sort of been friends ever since. And I've lived with him for a good while, not constantly, but sort of on and off. And now, of course, I'm on again. I'm living with him again. He's a great guy. But one thing that I'll usually do is I'll like go with him places, even to like mainly to things that like don't even matter. Like they're not like big life events. And I mean, he's been going through some, like, not getting to anything specific, he's been having a hard time lately. And just recently he was going to his dad's to help him with some paperwork, and he asked me to come along. Like, not to help or anything. I was just there. I literally sat there and read. But when he did that, I thought of Odysseus being glad that a friendly face was there. And yeah, I don't know, it just came up to me, and I was like, oh, that maps, and it maps onto reality, and it's, I think, highlights that once again Odysseus like has no idea about anyone. He doesn't know what anyone's motivations are, and just having someone who's like friendly is like such a boon when you're in that space. And he's also in like and it sort of like inversely tells us that Odysseus is feeling very vulnerable, because you wouldn't have that feeling if you felt comfortable. But he feels
absolutely
vulnerable in this point.
To kind of bring that to something, I guess, a little personal for me as well. Like, I'm not a very organized person. I'm kind of like a cluttered, disorganized person, and I get a lot of anxiety about it when I actually try to clean. ADHD is one hell of a thing to deal with. But I've noticed that, like, sometimes when I just have a friend there to, like, not do anything, again, kind of like you said, not do anything, but just sit with me and, like, talk to me and be there for me while I'm getting cleaning done, I get so much more done. So, like, I actually relate to that really deeply. It's kind of having that person of comfort there, even if that person is not really there to do anything for you or to do anything with you. They're just there, and that act alone kind of puts you at ease. And, I mean, Odysseus is out on an island right now. Not necessarily, kind of literally in a lot of ways, but I mean more in the kind of figurative sense. He's very much alone. He's very vulnerable. He's been isolated in his thoughts for some time. He's obviously had people with him along this journey that he's been on, but he has been dealing with all of this pretty much on his own. So it's a hard place to be in. So, like, that Athena is that comfort person for him, I think really is significant. And hilariously enough, as we may take that, that guy is so good at throwing a discus, like, having that would actually mean a lot. So I think you're right to bring it up.
Yeah, I wanted to get that out of the way before we left that sort of mental state for Odysseus, because he is going to get back home, and he is going to be in like a familiar place among familiar people.
I actually think it's kind of the perfect segue into this book, though, because this book is called Two Tricksters, and as we will come to find out, the two tricksters are Odysseus and Athena, is my interpretation of it, right?
I don't know if there are any other tricksterly candidates. No one else is tricky. I think it's fairly clearly referring to Odysseus and Athena.
And this makes total sense, because we've seen throughout all of these books how, like, they are two peas in a pod. Athena loves Odysseus. Odysseus loves to pay tribute to Athena because he knows her influence in his life. And it's just, it's like, I mean, Athena's, a female god, but it's a bromance.
There's a couple bros. I think it's interesting that Dr. Emily Wilson has chosen to basically declare these two as two tricksters. When we think of tricksters, we usually have like a specific kind of image comes up, right? Like when I think of I don't know, the Joker or Loki or any other like sort of agent of chaos or some like sneaky ultra planning sort of kind of like the I don't know, there's so many examples in pop culture, but Athena doesn't really like fit into that really. Like she doesn't seem like I don't know, she doesn't fit that bill. I think of someone who's like always skulking around and hatching plans and whispering in people's ears and stuff like that. But
I don't know. I don't necessarily take that interpretation, especially with the previous books of the Odyssey. Like I think that is actually probably a fair read of her in the Iliad. So I definitely get much more of that feeling from her in that realm. But in the Odyssey, I don't know, with all of the disguises and the kind of subterfuge and planning and the way with which she carries these things out, I do get a kind of trickster vibe from her. So I really like the description of her as that.
Well, I guess I'm not saying that like she isn't a trickster or tricky or cunning, because she is. But like when you say trickster, like people will usually think of, again, someone like Loki, like the Marvel character, sly and
I think of Bilbo
sneaky
Baggins.
or something like that. Yeah.
But that's kind of what I'm saying is like, I mean, look, yeah. I will always bring it back. I will always bring it back if I'm able to.
It's
every
it's
fucking
a good call.
time. But it's absolute ultimate trickster, and that's why he's chosen for that mission. Because they know, he, with his kind of under the radar trickster style, will be able to carry off things that they will not be able to do so.
Yeah, he wins a lot of fights with his words and his wits. And
yeah, absolutely. And if I think of Athena in that light, like, I totally see it. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not saying I don't see it. It's just like culturally, when you say trickster, Athena is not usually the figure who fills that silhouette that comes up when you think of, oh, how do I fill this out?
I think I'm
Athena.
maybe challenging. I think I may be challenging you on that a little bit.
Well, you don't need to challenge me on it, because I think it fits too. Dr. Emily Wilson is, I think, putting forth the challenge to the idea, or like the stereotype that would come up when you think of a trickster.
I think the part I'm challenging you on is not the part that you agree with me on. It's the cultural image of a trickster, I think, is actually a little more forgiving to what we see in Athena. I think I'm challenging the idea a little bit that it is actually like not that cultural image.
Okay, I guess that's fair. I guess I don't think that most people would think of like the goddess of wisdom as also filling a trickster role. Is my main thing. Whatever the stereotype is, I'm not sure if... I mean,
I think that does make some sense, but I think most portrayals that I've seen of Athena, though, do also include, like, not just the goddess of wisdom part, but also the kind of goddess of wit and cunning.
Yeah. Strategy, tactics, battle planning, stuff like that.
Yeah. Which, like, again, perhaps not, like, completely trickstery, but I think it overlaps enough, for me, at least, in a cultural image kind of sense.
Yeah, I guess, so like, coming from the Iliad, Athena is very, like, warlike. She goes toe-to-toe with Ares a couple times, and she just, rocks him. She's depicted as in this, like, mighty battle armor, and sometimes holding Zeus's incredible shield, and she's shown as very strong, as well as being very intelligent. But I guess when someone is given the designation of trickster, that I don't know, it almost implies a like a lack of that, I guess, physical prowess, that like the ability to solve things through force, which Athena clearly has the ability to do. So it's just like when you like a lot of like, especially in anime, right? Like a trickster character is usually someone who's like frailer or older or what have you, and they get what they want, yeah, through trickery and their guile. Yeah, just having that, like, having gone from the warlike Athena to the more, I guess, civil Athena.
Well, it's like, as opposed to this being a showcase of her physical prowess, this is far more a showcase of her wit and her intelligence and her mental capacity, and her, her intellectual and mental capacity. So yeah, that's definitely true.
Or just her propensity for putting on disguises and having Odysseus be in disguises.
She really likes playing dress up. She really likes playing dress up. I love it. I think it's just one of those things that catches me every time. I'm just like, what's it going to be this time? How is she going to disguise herself? What's the costume? I want to know about it.
She loves Halloween. She has the best costume every time.
She does love Halloween. She's like a theater kid. I was a theater kid. So I get that feeling from her. She likes to put on a show. So yeah, let's get into it. So Odysseus has finished his great story. And well, I think this is an important conversation to start off with, because like we really just get straight into this. Odysseus finishes his story. Alcinous is like, holy crap, what a story. And basically starts going into like this spiel to Odysseus about like, you will get home again, we will help you, it's gonna be okay. And Odysseus is like that person who's tapping their foot, who's like ready to leave, and they want to give him gifts, and he wants gifts. Who doesn't want gifts? I want gifts,
especially some pretty bowls.
Some pretty yeah. I love decorative like dishware, like really, yeah. Anyways,
you'll have to show me some of your collection sometime.
I never said I have a collection. I just said I like it.
Okay. Do you not have decorative dishware?
I mean, my mom has a lot of it. She loves that shit, and I appreciate it. I just don't have room for it because, as I mentioned before, I'm a relatively cluttered person. So you got, but
Odysseus gets a whole clutter of things as well.
He does. So one of the things that I love, and I think it might be in the next book when he gets back to Ithaca, but he is like, where do I take all my stuff?
Yes. Yeah. Damn. I want to fast forward to that part.
I know. We'll get there. We'll get there. We have to stay in the present. So basically, like, the gist of things is, and we can get into, whatever points of detail here. The gist of things is Alcinous is, like, loading Odysseus up with gifts and bowls and urns and, they're mixing bowls of wine. They're praying to Zeus to get him home safely, which is interesting considering how, like, all of this help that they're giving Odysseus is all going to backfire on them. We're going to see this very soon. We've alluded to it in previous episodes, but like, they're not going to be served well by the help that they give Odysseus. Poseidon is still pissed off.
Yeah, this is as we'll learn in this book, this is a clear example of, I guess, the good manners of hosting and sending off with blessings a stranger does not yield good results, in very much the opposite way as what happened with Nestor, where he put people up, happened to be a god there, and he was blessed by Athena, and the journey went well for Telemachus. This is sort of the opposite, where like it seems like Alcinous and Arete do all the right things. they get all the lords in the city to like chip in, and then they say like, oh, by the way, we'll tax the people so that like it's not as much of a bother on them, but we'll just sweep that under the rug. And Odysseus gets all this stuff, and they sail him, or they'll sail him to Ithaca, and then they'll come back, and it's all good. Except Zeus allows Poseidon to punish them, as we see, and like almost directly after they drop him off.
Yeah, and so one of the things I want to point to here is also, like, because it's the cruel irony of these words, is Odysseus's parting message to Alcinous, which is basically like, I'm really, really thankful for you giving me all these gifts and hosting me and getting me safely home. I hope I get home safe and find my wife faultless, which is like, oof. And then he says these like kind of famous last words around line 44-45. And may you Phaeacians live to bring joy to your wives and children, every blessing. I pray there is no trouble for your people. Which, like, so
yeah.
about that, Odysseus. So as you mentioned, they row him out, and they row him into this like area of the bay in Ithaca, into this, I think it's like a nymph's cave.
Let's see here. Well, they don't drop him off in a cave. They leave him on like sort of a beachy area. There's sand, and they put him under a tree, and they sort of like hide him, I guess, him and his stuff. That way, no passersby will like mess with him. And then they just sort of leave. He's asleep.
It is a cave.
Is it?
It's at the base head. There grows a long-leafed olive, and near it is a beautiful dark cave, a holy place of sea nymphs.
Well, yeah, but do they take him into the cave? They rode inside the bay. They knew the place of old. Their arms were pulling at top speed. Blah blah blah. Reached dry land.
No, you're right.
They disembarked.
Okay, so they put him kind of like at the mouth of the cave, I think is what it is.
It's probably near
I was
the
really
cave.
fascinated as to like why this sea nymph cave was described. It sounds awesome.
It's probably served as a landmark. Like that would be my guess.
Yeah, that makes sense. But so they get him to this cave, and then after this is when Poseidon goes up to Zeus and is like, yo, I told you that I would let him go home. Like, you nodded your head and I had to assent to that. I didn't really have a choice. I'm still very angry about it. But you nodded your head, and this is where we are. But like, these people helped him, and I'm not okay with that. And so I would like to turn their ship into stone and create an entire mountain around their town. And I don't think he ever gets to surrounding their town with the mountain, because when he turns their ship to stone, they freak out. And Alcinous is like, oh my god, it's true. My dad once said that Poseidon would punish us for helping people, and it happened. Like, my dad said our ship would be destroyed. Our ship has been destroyed. Let's all pray to the gods. Who is it? Yeah, we have to sacrifice a bunch of bulls to Poseidon so that this mountain doesn't surround our town, and we will never help a traveler again.
As I said in the last episode, there's a suspicious amount of prophecy popping up and around. Sometimes it's stuff that like spoils the story, like air quotes spoils the story, and sometimes it like justifies the story. This happens a couple times, like when Polyphemus gets blinded. He's like, oh, there was a prophecy that Odysseus would blind me, but I thought he'd be cool looking, not like a little guy like Odysseus. And here we have a similar deal, right? Alcinous has already mentioned some prophecy like this in earlier books, but now he's bringing it up again. He's like, yep, the prophecy came true and stuff. We better try to appease Poseidon. But the weird thing about this is that, as you said, like, Poseidon doesn't get to surrounding their city with a mountain, but we actually don't know if he does or doesn't. It just kind of leaves us there. Like, we don't know what becomes of the Phaeacians. The Phaeacians. We cut away and we never cut back.
Yeah, it's kind of bizarre. It's just like, I mean, like the last thing we really leave them on is like, we are going to sacrifice things to Poseidon and we are never going to help travelers again, which like makes me kind of sad. These people who have been so kind to so many people, now the next
Yeah.
person who shows up after Odysseus ruined everything is just going to be like, help please, and they're going to be like, no, the last guy ruined everything.
Yeah, and I don't know, and this whole thing sort of runs opposite to what we've been talking about, or what we've been identifying as, a long-standing theme, right? Show this kindness to strangers because it's a good thing to do. Who knows? Maybe like Zeus wills it. Who knows? Maybe there's a god. It's a god. All that sort of stuff. And yet, it seems anyway that this is the right move for them to make these
probably.
promises.
I mean, if you help a guy who you were told would ruin everything and then it actually happens, one might make the conclusion from that you should stop helping people if you've been told it will make the gods angry. But it's really kind of like contradictory to this message that we've gotten over and over about guest right, because they've done everything right as far as I can tell. Quote unquote right. They've made sacrifices to gods, they've made prayers, they've done rituals, they've welcomed the stranger,
Yeah, well, I'll bring to the fore again what Dr. Daniel said to me in a private chat, where he said the Phaeacians could be understood as bad readers of the Odyssey because Odysseus tells them that Poseidon specifically is cross with him specifically, and also the story with the bag of winds and the king saying, "You're so unlucky, it would be like fucked to help you, so get out now."
If Courtney was here, that she would insist that I remind you that it's a bag of farts.
Yes, the bag of farts, that one, and yeah, and it's, I guess it's I don't know how we're supposed to understand how Alcinous and Arete think about this as he's telling it, because everything in Odysseus' story is telling him to not help him. They're descendants of Poseidon, they're seafarers, and we all know Poseidon's big on the water, and on top of that, Odysseus is a very unlucky man, ill-fated, if you will, and such that helping him may be enough to curse them. And all this information, they still help him, which is not very pragmatic.
No, but like, what a guy.
Yeah. There's so I'll make a video game reference. Do you know of the video game Death Stranding?
I don't.
Yeah, there's a, the Metal Gear Solid series, right? You've heard of it at least.
Yeah, I've heard of that. Yes.
Yeah, it's a long-standing video game series directed by one guy, the same guy for the whole time, Hideo Kojima. And recently, he put out a game called Death Stranding, where you play as a delivery man, played by Daryl from The Walking Dead. And one of the characters in that game ends up going through this incredible ordeal to basically prevent a town from being nuked or something like that. And when she's talking with the main character, Sam, about it later, this is the part where you'd sort of expect someone who's done something heroic to say, yeah, I'm glad I did the right thing. But she says, I regret it. I've regretted it for ever since then. I wish I'd never done it. I wish I'd never done this thing that helped all these people. And so it's a very human response to that sort of thing. And so I wonder if Alcinous holds these same sorts of ideas. It seems like it's the same sort of process where Alcinous, against all warning signs, at his own risk, at the risk of his own people, and Arete, they do this thing and then they get punished for it. And obviously we're sort of left to see what happens next, but he does the same sort of thing that this character in this video game who underwent a great trial and then regretted it. He's sort of doing the same thing. He's like, okay, yeah. I wish I'd never done this.
I mean, I think that's a great read on it. I think it would be really interesting to, like, we've talked about the many spin-offs of these poems, and like I think this is one of them that I would be really interested to see, of like what happened after Odysseus leaves the Phaeacians island.
I wouldn't be surprised if there is a continuation.
Yeah, we'll have to look into that. So actually I was incorrect. The part that I was talking about where Odysseus is like, where can I take all my stuff, is actually in this book, and we're coming up on it right now, and I'm very excited for it.
Yes.
So what happens is, after, we hear about the retribution of Poseidon onto Alcinous and his people, Odysseus like wakes up in Ithaca. He's all like sleepy-eyed, and while he was asleep, Athena has cast this like kind of disguising mist on Ithaca. So when Odysseus wakes up, he doesn't recognize where he is. And she does this so that she can kind of... So this is a dual purpose. It's both for her to kind of like test the waters with him, I think, and see where he's at mentally and see like what his plan is. But it's also for her to be able to make him unrecognizable to his wife. Like, she doesn't want anyone recognizing anyone else. She's taking control of this moment. So this is, for me, where trickster number 1 comes in. Like, trickster number 1 has entered stage right and is casting this mist on trickster number 2, who then wakes up and is like, where am I? This is completely unfamiliar. Where can I carry all my treasure, is the actual line. This is line 200. Where am I now? Are those who live here violent and cruel? Or are they kind to strangers, folks who fear the gods? Where can I carry all my treasure? And where can I go wandering? So he wakes up and he's like kind of confused. He goes over to his pile of treasure, kind of suspecting one of the Phaeacians may have stolen some of it as they sailed off. He counts all of his cauldrons and tripods and golden cloth, and none of it's missing. So he's like, what's going on here?
Yeah, and none of it's missing. And this is just like a little, I guess, example of, we're seeing it again. Odysseus's sort of cynical nature. He wakes up, he doesn't recognize where he is at first, because Athena has cast this mist about him. Or caused Ithaca to become unrecognizable. But the first thing he goes to is like, oh, I should never have trusted those people. They might have stolen some of my stuff. But he counts it out, none of it's stolen. And then Athena approaches him in disguise, of course.
In disguise, of course. Dress up number, I've lost count. And so she comes to him as a shepherd, a really kind of like young and, I would say, probably like handsome looking shepherd, because it says young and soft skinned as a prince, and holding a javelin. And Odysseus is just like, oh my god, you're the first person I've met here. Hello. I think it's really important that he says, I pray to you and supplicate as if you were a god. I touch your knees. Please help me. He's supplicating to a god as if she were a god. So once again, like, he loses absolutely no time in basically doing the exact right thing.
Yeah, I guess so. It's obviously the right move. Athena expects it. It's especially interesting too, because he wakes up and he's so suspicious and goes through all of his stuff, but then the first person he sees looks like clean and put together enough for him to be like, you're obviously good people, please help me. Yeah, and I guess this is the weird this is the weird part of like why Athena casts the mist over his eyes. It says earlier, like, so she can tell him how things stood, and that's kind of what she's doing. She tells him, oh, this is this sort of place. It's rough, bad for horses. This is Ithaca. And Odysseus, thinking on his feet, he's like, or rather, Athena says, I think like pretty much everyone has heard of Ithaca. And Odysseus is like super happy to hear that he's in Ithaca, but like he thinks really fast on his feet. And he's like, "Oh, I have heard of Ithaca, although I'm not from Ithaca." And then he goes into this like long story about like how he fought the Trojan War and he killed some dudes and he worked for Idomeneus or something like that, or he almost worked for Idomeneus,
the
but he didn't
very
want
first
to.
thing he does is, like, as per usual, launches into this story just filled with lies, like, just so many lies, because he knows that if he is on Ithaca, anyone he meets could potentially be someone who is turned against him, you know, or just, again, we've talked about this a lot, this cynical viewpoint that he has, that, like, he can't possibly tell someone the truth because he has to suss out and kind of have control of the situation. Yeah. And Athena finds this hilarious. You know, she cracks a smile and turns back into a woman's form and is like, "I knew I liked you."
And I think that, like, this attitude is, like, relatively normal in when it's, like, clear that you should have this attitude. I watched there's a D&D show that I watched. And one of the players is exactly like this. It's actually kind of crazy. The streamer's name is Destiny, and he is always always telling just the right amount of information that he has to, and then he'll like spin a tale around the true parts of the information, and he'll keep, and whenever like his other friends are like you know, like they say too much, they're like, when someone says, "Oh, where are you from?" they'll tell them the truth, right? They'll say, "Oh, we're from here," and which is like, you know, I guess something that you would normally do, like if someone were to walk up, like if you're in like a more stressful situation where it's like, okay, I don't know who to trust, obviously you would respond dodgily.
Yeah, absolutely.
But he is in that mode like almost all the time, which I think is what makes him special. I don't think it's necessarily that. I mean, he is especially skilled and good at weaving these tales. Like he just like comes up with it on the spot,
gears are always going in his brain. Yeah, like this is something that you see over and over. He's always like machinating and moving little chess pieces around and kind of figuring out what the other person's move is going to be. But now I mean, at the very least equally matched, but I would say he's outmatched here because he's dealing with a god who is every bit as much cunning and witty and clever as he is, if not far more, just by virtue of being a god. And so she like transforms into human forms, like, "You're so talented at lying, you're so duplicitous, I love it. We're both really smart. Isn't that awesome? By the way, I'm Athena."
Yeah. Oh, even like to follow up on what I just said, like Athena even says like a normal person would like run straight home and like have this I guess renewed sense of like optimism, and I'm reading into it, but like a sudden optimism and a special, you know, joy that sort of takes over their judgment. But Odysseus, either he doesn't have it or he's really good at controlling it. Well, actually, we know he has it because he does feel joy when he hears that this is Ithaca, but he is able to prevent himself from acting on it. He always has his wits about him.
Right. He's got a great poker face.
Yes.
He's got like an epic poker face. And she's impressed. And because she says, like, "No man can plan and talk like you, and I am known among the gods for insight and craftiness." That is high praise.
Mm.
So she then tells him that she's going to reveal the challenges that he has to face, and that this is your fate. And he's just like, he's now thrown off. I think this actually is kind of one of those things that, like, was one of the first time we see him kind of thrown off like this, because he's very wary, and he's like, "Well, you disguise yourself in so many ways, and I've been doing all of these things, and I haven't really seen you protect me, And I've been waiting for the gods to help me. Nobody really came. And now I'm not sure if, like, is this actually my home, or are you just messing with me?
Yeah. Yeah, he's even suspicious of the gods, which I think is
bold move.
Not so much necessarily bold, but more like if there is like if Odysseus's suspicion of people has like different levels, being suspicious of a god is like the peak of that. Like the most complete version of suspicion. Even of Athena, whom I suspect he knows likes him, or has liked him at least. But even now, I guess he's questioning, maybe that's changed. And, he said 20 years of bad luck. So, I mean, it makes sense that he would say,
that's a lot of bad luck.
What's going on here? And I think Athena explains to him that it's basically like, I have to respect Poseidon,
Yeah, and she also kind of like applauds him for this wariness. She applauds him for this wariness because she's just like, you have such intuition and such focus. Anyone else who would have come home would have just like gone straight home and been like, oh my god, I'm home, this is amazing. But you didn't do that. You're like gonna test your wife, and I never doubted you, and this is Poseidon's doing, but like we're gonna make a plan and we're gonna help you out. And with this, she disperses this mist that has been hanging over Ithaca, and Odysseus can finally see, like, oh yeah, this is home. But go for it, whatever you were thinking.
I was gonna say, this is a really cute part too. Where
it's adorable.
Yeah, like Odysseus is like, ready to go, and Athena's like, okay, now we have to hide your stuff. And it says the goddess went down in the murky cave. This is the cave that we mentioned earlier, and looked around for hiding spots. The idea that they're looking around for stuff together is like very, I don't know, it's very people. It's very people. And, she's helping him carry stuff. And I'm just imagining like, carrying heavy stuff and like going back out and coming back. Like it's such a not godlike thing. It's not a very godlike image, but that's why I like it so much. Like
it's Athena's a very kind of ordinary thing for a goddess to be doing.
Yeah, like looking around, you can imagine like her hand up on her forehead doing that thing, and then she's carrying his heavy tripods, like leaning back to counterbalance it, and like walking in and then walking back out and stuff. I don't know.
It does feel right, and this is like really the kind of time where you get to see them be like really buddy. I mean, up until this point, it's mostly been kind of Athena doing things behind the scenes or in disguise, but now this is Athena just openly being buddies with Odysseus, and I love it. It's great. And they start getting to planning, and she's telling him how these suitors have been here, courting your wife, trying to give her gifts and wrecking all of your shit. And he's just like, oh wow, I would have been Agamemnon. Like I would have met the same fate, and unless you had told me this, which interested me because I'm like, hasn't he been told about this?
The only way he would have learned this is from the prophet. Did the prophet mention the suitors in book 11?
I think so. I want to say yes, but
we can.
If you want to page back a little bit and look.
Yeah, let's see. It's actually really early in the book. I think we mentioned when we were reading it that like, they get what they came for like really, really quickly. I don't believe.
Oh no, it does say it. Okay,
does it?
Around line like 118, and you will find invaders eating your supplies at home, courting your wife with gifts. Then you will match the suitors' violence and kill them all. Like he literally tells him that this is what's happening. Because I remember when I got to this portion of this book, I was like, wait a minute, didn't someone else tell him? Wait, Athena is not the first person who's told him this.
That's a pretty good catch. I actually did not catch that. Yeah, and it's possible that this is a part where Odysseus. Let's see. So hold on. Sorry, I just struck a
dispatching a fly.
A flying. It wasn't a fly. It was like a small, large-winged insect, probably a nocturnal one. Anyway, so Athena's purpose for blinding him to his location was that she could reveal it to him, which is kind of messed up in a weird way.
It's like, is a little bit.
It's like, you're home, you got there, but I'm gonna make sure, I'm gonna insinuate myself into that process. And here she's kind of doing that same sort of thing. But Odysseus learned of this thing happening at home in the underworld. I don't know if like Athena knows what he knows, or rather knows that he knows this. It's possible she does.
He's kind of playing along here. Like he's playing along with, the bit in a way that, she might not be aware of. Again, I think it's a really good question of like, how much is she aware of the experience in the underworld and the prophet and that message and what Odysseus knows. But regardless of that, Odysseus is playing into this. And you're like, oh my God, if you hadn't told me this, I totally would have died just like Agamemnon did.
It's a very flattery thing to do for Odysseus. And we know that this is at the forefront of his mind because he recounted it just recently to Alcinous in his story. Even though this happened like a while ago, or like the prophecy that he received in the underworld happened a long time ago. His recounting of it was fairly recent, so we know that he knows this. So him saying, "Oh, I would have died like Agamemnon in my own house if you had not explained exactly how things stand." Yeah,
that definitely caught my attention because I was like, wait just a dang minute.
Yeah.
So that, I'm very interested to kind of ponder that further, I think, a little bit.
I don't know how much we need to ponder it. It's one of those things, like, this is something that I think happens in the Odyssey. The most prominent one is like how we sort of get a little microcosm of how Odysseus can like twist the truth with his run with Nausicaa, and then we're left to sort of take that knowledge into his story. And now we sort of get the same sort of thing where Odysseus has his wits about him in a very like clear way when he first runs into Athena, and now this is a less clear way, but he's still that person, even though like
that's true.
They've been galumphing around, hiding things and finding hiding spots.
I think my further thoughts on it are actually more related to like things we've talked about before in terms of the translation or even just kind of the creation of this story. And like, would this have potentially been a part where like a bard kind of forgot that they had said this before or something like that? I don't know. It's just, for whatever reason, it is an itch I feel like I will need to scratch at a later time.
Well, just as we have to ask ourselves how much credit we give Odysseus when he's saying things and we're not given insight into his actual thoughts, we also have to level that question at the composer. This is sort of what
absolutely.
This is sort of what part of what I was getting at. I think when we were talking about the Iliad, and when I asked like, why are we studying this so closely? Not necessarily because I didn't know that, but like how many of these details are so significant that they warrant such close scrutiny. It's
like, this may be another one of those moments for sure where I might just be like, I don't know why this has my attention so much, but for whatever reason it does, and I can't exactly put my finger on that.
But I do really like the idea that Odysseus has read correctly that Athena likes to feel important, and so when she tells him this, he lets her feel important.
Like, they love each other so much. I love this like friendship, or this, maybe not friendship, but like partnership of the minds.
Well, like Odysseus's love with or his relationship with Penelope, his relationship with Athena is equally weird. I think we're seeing now. This is like, I think this is the most and longest we've seen them interact yet. I don't think we've seen them really sit down and have a scene, and this is very much that. And
oh yeah, this is it.
And this is kind of how Odysseus treats his wife as well. This is how they treat each other.
There's all these parallels in the relationships that Odysseus has with other people. You know, whether it's the types of ways he acts around strangers, but also, and I think the more interesting relationships are the way he acts with people that he trusts or that he knows very well. His wife, Athena, the swineherd, his servant, Eumaeus, who we will get to very shortly. Like, all of these people, the way he treats them is so fascinating because he carries this same cynicism, but it also like has a really well defined purpose.
Got him. All right. In case I edited it out, there was a loud slam, and I did defeat this flying insect.
Dispatched the beast.
Yes. But I guess I specifically bring up Penelope because she is, and not like the swineherd.
Well, she's his wife.
Well, not just because she's his wife, but because she is so much alike with him. They treat each other with equals, or what feels like equal skepticism and tests and cunning and trickery and suspicion, cynicism, such that, you know, in like they are made for each other. You know, Odysseus is, especially for to read into this passage where he says, "Oh, I would have died like Agamemnon." He's doing the same thing here with Athena. He has it always turned on, and he like never really turns it off.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, this is where we find ourselves with these kind of very interestingly matched minds. And Athena, you know, as he plays into this bit and says, "Oh wow, I would have totally died if you hadn't told me that," she gets very serious with him and is like, "I will be with you, I will help you." And then this is like terrifying and badass. "I do believe the suitors who devour your livelihood will spatter your broad floors with blood and brains." Which is like, okay, that's intense.
Yeah.
She tells him, you know, "I'm going to disguise you as, you know, an old kind of decrepit looking guy with weird hair and wearing rags, and everyone's gonna be like turned off by you completely. And, you know, everyone will think you're, you know, ugly and gross, and you're gonna go to your swineherd, who I just mentioned, and he is going to fill you in on the details of what has happened while you're gone. And while you do that, I'm going to Sparta to fetch your son Telemachus." And like sorry, total brain fart just there. She's gonna go get Telemachus, who is with Menelaus, to find out if you're still alive. And at this, Odysseus is like, "Wait a minute, he doesn't know I'm alive? Why didn't you tell him?"
And yeah, it's just
and she's just like, no, don't worry about it. He's out there chilling and like feasting with Menelaus. Everything's fine. I'm gonna go get him. It's gonna be good, and then we're gonna kill everyone. It's gonna be a great time.
I think we've discussed why she's, or no. This came up when she came to Penelope in a dream, I think, or something. Oh, yeah. She came to Penelope in a dream, and she asked her, like, what is going on with Odysseus, and she said, "I'm not going to tell you either way." And this feels very much the same sort of response. It does. Where she's very much keeping everything except for the things that she wants to tell people close to her chest.
Yeah, it's got a very like, shush, let this just let this happen.
Yeah.
Just let this happen.
Yeah.
You know, feeling to it where she's just like, it's part of the plan. I'm a god. Don't worry about it. Like,
Yeah.
Just, suspend your disbelief for a short time more and everything's going to be fine because we are going on a rampage, my friend. We're going to kill everyone. And so, yeah, but it is, I think it's kind of fascinating, like, how even as she fills him in on all of these details and is beginning to formulate this plan with him, she still is not telling his son, who is meant to participate in this plan, what's going on. And Odysseus is just like, I'm sorry, why?
It's possible that, I mean, if Athena's being altruistic, maybe she's not telling him so that Odysseus can tell him himself.
Yeah, I think there's definitely merit to that idea. So that, like, honestly, and this is kind of makes me really happy, I think she just wants that Hallmark moment of, like, father and son reunited, like, running to each other through a field, and then they hug. She just wants, she wants that beautiful moment where father and son are reunited with each other, and she gets to, like, take the picture.
Yeah.
So, who knows though? But with this, she taps her little magic wand, quite literally. And
this is the only time I think that her wand is... I didn't even know she had a wand.
I didn't know she had a wand either, but I love it.
I guess she has one.
She apparently does, because then with her wand, Athena tapped him. And he goes all withered and arthritic, and she dims his eyes, and she makes him all raggedy, and this is the point from whence I will begin referring to him as Old Man Odysseus, just to kind of keep things clear in my own head. And that's where we leave book 13. So I think this is a perfect time for a little break, little intermission, and when we come back, we will jump into book 14, and we will see you all then. Hello, dear listener, and thanks for sticking with us through our little break. We'll be back in just a couple minutes, but I'd like to take a moment during the break to thank a few people and give a little information about the podcast. First, thank you for listening. This podcast has no sponsor. We've produced everything in-house and on our own time, and if you all are enjoying the fruits of our labor, that is the best thanks that we can imagine. You can follow us on Twitter at Homer_bound for new episodes, or just watch our podcast page wherever you're listening to us now. I'd like to thank Wriste for inviting me along on this adventure, which has been such great fun. I'd also like to thank the composer and performer of all the music you've heard throughout the episode, who happens to be my dad. Thanks, Dad. You're the absolute best. I'd also like to thank Bubbo for her contributions to the audio, Webs2D for original art of my llama character, Total Love for additional art and graphic design, and Ghosty for graphic design as well. I'd like to thank our many guests for their time and expertise, and finally, an especially big thank you to Dr. Daniel, who closes out each show with additional insights on our discussions. We hope you'll consider reading along with us. We're using the Emily Wilson translation of the Odyssey, and while we try to keep things intelligible for those who are new to the story, you might get more out of our discussions if you've read ahead, so feel free to pause and return later after you've read up. We would also like to remind you to stay tuned after Wriste and I have finished, since Dr. Daniel will have some awesome words of wisdom to add to our discussion. All right, thanks for hanging out through our break, and I will give it back to me and Wriste for the second half of this episode of Homer Bound. And we're back, and I have refreshed my tea as per usual. I even got myself a little nightcap of some Nocello, which is a walnut liqueur, that I'm gonna have a little sip on. It's delightful.
Nice. And I had a Cows of Helios moment a little while ago. I picked up a few small bags of Sour Patch Kids candies, which are amazing. I've eaten 2 of them already, and I was about to eat the 3rd, and I said, no, I'm going to save it for tomorrow. I exerted.
But will the sun god punish you nonetheless? I feel like Sour Patch Kids are just like an absolute S tier, a very high tier candy.
It is the correct balance between sweet and sour. Like sour Skittles are good, but they are so sour. And some of them
I love sour Skittles because I love super sour things, but
they
will like burn a hole in your tongue.
Yeah,
the way that like if you were a kid when I was a kid, which you were younger than me, so maybe not so much. However, and people who were kids in my time in like the 90s and early 2000s, like if y'all ate a bunch of Warheads and like absolute, like my friends and I would put like 4 or 5 Warheads in our mouth and just burn acid into our tongues. It was fantastic.
Jesus Christ. Well, yeah, anyway, Sour Patch Kids have that correct. It's like it's got the sour and the sweet.
They have.
It's like perfect.
A lovely balance.
You can keep eating them is the thing. Like you have to stop with sour Skittles. You have to stop, otherwise your teeth will.
Not with that attitude.
Will grind away.
Sure, with that attitude. With that attitude, you have to stop. I have never been able to stop myself when it comes to sour Skittles, but again, I
you get to a point where like, okay, I should stop.
Absolutely.
Sour Patch Kids, though, you can eat them for a while and be like, and keep going, and I'll be okay.
Quality choice in candy, my friend. So yeah, we've refreshed ourselves, clearly. And so let's get into book 14, which is titled A Loyal Slave. And have we met you, what is this guy's name again? Eumaeus.
Eumaeus.
There's a Eumaeus somewhere, I think, in the Iliad, maybe.
Right.
And this is what I was going to, these wires are crossed for me. Like, if I think of Eumaeus, I'm thinking of Eumaeus, and if I'm thinking of Eumaeus, I'm thinking of Eumaeus. So this might be an issue. I apologize in advance to anyone who I may confuse with this.
Or like Antilochus and Antinous.
Antilochus and Antinous. Or like, for me, last episode, Alcinous and Antinous. Like, there are a lot of similar names. It is a constant source of confusion for me. Although I will say, I think a lot of them have distinguishing characteristics that kind of let them stick with you a lot of the time. But it can get mighty confusing.
Yeah, although there are definitely fewer names in the Odyssey than there are.
Yes, like absolutely.
Even taking away like the random soldiers who die, I think there a decent number more names in
with book 2 alone and the Register of Ships, like that one book alone I think has more names in it than like the entirety of the Odyssey.
Yeah, well, I don't know.
I might be exaggerating a little bit on that, but it feels like it for sure.
Just to make it like the comparison fair, I'm trying to like remove like all the extra names that aren't like real characters or whatever.
Yeah, well, the main characters of the Iliad, I think you're absolutely right, do still significantly outnumber, what we would consider to be the primary characters of the Odyssey. Because it's so focused on this one person. And while the Iliad is really focused on Achilles, there are a lot of other characters who kind of, like, the Iliad reminds me a lot more of like an HBO show where it's a bunch of character actors. And there's all these names that stick out and all of these characters that you remember, whereas the Odyssey feels like very much like a very singularly focused
You get Jake Gyllenhaal to play Odysseus or something like that.
Odysseus is Donnie Darko.
He'll never escape that movie.
He won't. It's like when I think of Jake Gyllenhaal, that is the movie that I think of. Even that, I guess, or potentially like, I guess, Brokeback Mountain or something like that, which is
actually a movie I haven't seen. I just know of it.
It's a fantastic movie. I mean, people know of it for the obvious reasons because of the controversy it created and whatnot. But like, it's a spectacular movie.
Well, I know most for the line. The I wish I could quit you.
I wish I could quit you.
It's so good. But this is this book, which is titled A Loyal Slave, I think is interesting because we have, up until this point, I think, generally agreed that Odysseus is probably not the world's best leader, but we sort of are encountering now the inverse of that.
I think it's really interesting that you bring that up because I feel like in the conversation that we had about that before, it was, and I don't remember if it was maybe you, me, or even potentially Scott or one of our other guests that brought this up. But like, he's not a great leader when he's out of his element. But now he's home again and he's back in that place of comfort for him. Even though it's an uncomfortable situation with the suitors, he's back in his element. He's back in the place that he belongs. And so I think this is actually one of the first opportunities that we get to see him as a good leader, which I think is, kind of what you're getting at here.
Well, not so much see him as a good leader because he's still doing very much his Odysseus thing. He, as we'll see, he spins an elaborate tale for Eumaeus, his loyal slave and servant, who's a swineherd, tends to all the animals and stuff. But I'm more referring to the fact that Odysseus is well loved and thought of fondly by pretty much, not by most people, but by people who are like close enough to him.
By his household. People within his household.
Well, okay, I guess. Even as I'm saying this, so like obviously we have the suitors who doesn't seem like they cared too much for him, because they're disrespecting his house, and even as we'll find later, although I don't know if this has to do with like the recency of things, like his old servants, slaves, like the nanny and this guy, Eumaeus, I'll think of him very fondly. But of course, as we'll learn later, like a lot of the slave girls, are entertaining the suitors more extravagantly than perhaps they should, at least by the standards of the house. And Odysseus will, of course, eventually get rid of them, which is way far ahead. But so even as I'm saying this, like it's not like, I don't know how much Odysseus' reputation necessarily precedes him, but at least for the people who were there when he was ruling, it seems as though people liked him. And even earlier on in the book, there were at least a couple. I think it was Mentor who said that thing that I meant that I brought up. It was like, oh, like kings should rule poorly. Because Odysseus ruled well and he's gotten all this bad luck. And Athena said the same. And now I don't know exactly how you're supposed to take a compliment from Athena because she has very interesting priorities. But, at least there's an attitude that Odysseus was actually like a good king. Again, I don't know exactly how true this is, but at least among certain people who are qualified to speak about that, Odysseus was remembered positively by those who were there, who were qualified to speak about it.
Yeah, the people
such as Eumaeus.
The people who have actually known him, because I think also, I mean, we've been told this a number of times, but it is important to remember Odysseus hasn't been home for like 10, 20 years. His child was a baby when he left. So these older servants who have actually had a chance to know him have had more time to form more solid opinions of him. They actually know him. Like, his kid hasn't really ever known him because last time he was home, Telemachus was a little wee baby. these are the only people who have actually had an opportunity to know him, which kind of makes sense to me when the, slave girls and the younger members of the household end up kind of betraying him because they don't know this guy. Or
Yeah,
like certainly,
maybe.
if and when they did know him, they probably weren't working for him yet.
I guess I'm curious that so they're called slave boys and slave girls in this translation, which of course strongly connotes youth. But we also know that they're long-standing members of Odysseus's household. So I wonder if any of these like slave girls are like Penelope's age. I imagine Penelope is like coming up on 40 around there. I imagine she married relatively young. So I said she was like 35, 37, 38, something like that. So yeah, well, I wonder if any of these like slave girls are of that age, right? If there's more than just, I mean, Nanny seems like she's old or
Yeah.
older, whatever that means in that time. Whether that means like 70 or 50, I'm not quite sure.
Yeah.
And even like the suitors, like they're old enough to regard Telemachus as a child. So it's possible that, they also knew
Yeah, but I wouldn't
Odysseus.
necessarily consider the suitors members of his household.
Sure. I guess I'm thinking more like Mentor, for instance, is not a member of his household. But
Yeah,
he spoke very
that's
well
true.
of him.
Yeah,
And
well, that's because he knows him, actually.
yeah, well, I suspect if you are positioned to be a suitor, like I'm assuming it means that you have like fairly high social and economic status, whatever that means. In a place like Ithaca, that you would have at least had company with Odysseus or like known him in some degree, or at least felt his rule. And I mean, even as I'm saying, like it seems as though he was fairly well regarded by a large number of people. It's also worth noting that there are at least people who didn't respect him in the
Oh,
way
for
that
sure.
were given by, say, Eumaeus or Nanny or Mentor.
Although, what I find interesting and what I kind of want to come back to is something that you brought up about, like, so I think when you first brought this up, it was also kind of in the context of Odysseus as a leader of people and how we've kind of talked about how he isn't the best leader. And this is where I see the contrast because I think you do have a point in saying that, like, the people who might not regard him well certainly exist, but of the people that we know that he has led in the past. So this is why I'm kind of focusing on the members of his household and the people who have worked for him, as servants
Mm-hmm.
or slaves. The older ones who actually have had a chance to know him, it seems to me, I mean, I don't think we get really many contrary examples of people who speak poorly or betray him in terms of the suitors. In terms of the people that he has had a chance to like directly lead in that way as subordinates.
I suppose. I mean, there's also a difference between like being a captain of a fleet or a crew and where you're like working so closely with those people
Yeah,
as
that's
opposed to
very
being
true.
king. And even then, like Mentor isn't saying that Odysseus is good as a person, although he may be saying that as well. He's referring to him as a king, like as his role as a king, which is more than
Yeah,
just your household, right? It's all of Ithaca. He's king of
it's
Ithaca.
respect of his authority and his place in the world, his agency, if you will.
Yeah, well, and like directly complimenting, or I guess as he was pining for Odysseus's rule, because his rule, at least to him, was pleasant, or good, or he approved of it in one way or another. And we're not really given why, aside from I think generalities. I don't know if he says that like, oh, Odysseus was kind. Odysseus was. It actually must. It's there somewhere. I suspect that
Sure.
he and Athena give like some generalities that you can latch onto. Yeah, I don't know. And we're also probably not going to hear specifically from people who may not have enjoyed Odysseus's
That's
rule.
very
The
true.
the closest we get is his dissenting crewmate, whose name I cannot remember. Yeah, I don't know. Once again, Ithaca is also a bit of a black box, at least.
It definitely can
in the context of the story.
But yeah, so we get to. So at this point, we don't have a name for this person. We arrive at the swineherd, his slaves' area on his master's property, where he has a herd of boars and these are the very animals that the suitors have been snacking on. And I like that it describes kind of the layout here and gives us a sense of like what not only what Odysseus's property is like, but also like the way that this man takes care of it.
Mm-hmm.
It gives you a real sense of like this is not only Odysseus's home, but that this is this man's home as well, and he takes pride in his work. And this is kind of one of the things that ends up really like heartening Odysseus and really kind of signifying to him that he really is home, and that there are people here who are going to help him be fully home, because this is one of the people who will aid him the most also in the plan to kill the suitors.
Yeah, and I mean, we've observed as we've gone on, every place that has been visited, either by Telemachus or Odysseus, has been like really intricately described, as opposed to like in Troy, like in the Iliad, we didn't get like elaborate descriptions of, say, the halls in which Priam and the other kings discussed what to do next. It was just sort of there, and it happened.
Yeah, well, you get like they went into a tent, and then all of this stuff happened. Whereas, again, like this is such a book about home, but also just kind of about places and locations and travel, and so these lush descriptions just go such a long way into giving you like such incredible mental imagery. I really love that about the entire story of the Odyssey. So Odysseus gets to this, herd of boars and is kind of walking up to the porch where he finds his servant sitting out there. And as he does this, the guard dogs are upon him, absolutely ripping him one. And his servant comes and kind of chases them off with a stick. And I find it like really kind of important that it says that the dogs, they being the dogs, would have hurt him terribly and shamed him on his own property.
Yeah, that would have been unfortunate.
I think this is kind of where the poet really starts driving home that like Odysseus is being shamed on his own land. This is such a theme throughout these last, like the back end of the book is like the shame that Odysseus is suffering and would continue to suffer by the situation that he finds himself in his own home, and how important it is for him to take care of that situation by murdering everyone.
Yeah, well, also this passage is a reminder, and like I guess maybe even this entire book is a reminder that Odysseus, even though he's back, he's not really home yet. And he also hasn't been home. Ithaca has aged 20 years. And so the place that Odysseus wants to come, like 20 years is a long ass time. Like
it is.
So the place that Odysseus wants may not totally be there. It's like it may just not exist, and we see him take steps to right things, like killing the suitors, which will happen eventually, as well as even executing the slaves who were the slave girls specifically who were
having affairs and acting in league.
Yeah, like that is that reads to me as like an effort to bring this. So when when these guard dogs rush Odysseus, we have to remember that if Odysseus had been there all that time, those guard dogs would not have rushed Odysseus because they would have known him.
They would have known him.
Right? This is like one of those murder mysteries where like, oh, why didn't the dog bark? It must have been someone they knew, right? And it's sort of the inverse of that, where it's like, oh, the dogs don't know him, and of course, Eumaeus also doesn't know him.
Yeah, well, I mean, also keep in mind he is heavily disguised by Athena, you know?
This is not an indictment on Eumaeus.
It makes sense.
Powers of...
No, but I also think that's a thought that goes into my mind is like the dogs don't recognize him because he's a completely different person right now.
Well, I would suspect that the dogs don't recognize him because the dogs that are being used right now aren't the dogs that it's been 20 years. Dogs don't live that long.
That's also very true. Those would be some seriously
These are
old
fresh dogs.
These are
fresher dogs. So yeah, like Odysseus, he's been gone a long time, but Ithaca has also been gone a long time, if that makes any sense. Things have changed, right?
Yeah, I mean the world still turns while you're not at home.
Yeah, and Penelope is dealing with that. I'll save it for later, but Penelope's intentions and thoughts are mysterious, and so like what she has intended to do and what she ends up intending to do is a bit of a mystery that we'll get to dive into. Yeah. What have these 20 years without her husband done to her intentions and her prospects for her future? Anyway, yeah, Odysseus.
Indeed.
He's been gone a long time.
He's been gone a long time, but he's back now. But nobody knows that yet. And clearly, his servant doesn't because he's just like, holy crap, old man, my dog's almost ripped you a new one. But come in and eat. And he immediately lays out, goat skins and starts preparing food for him and gives him wine. And this is a passage that I starred because this is something we've gone over and over and over again. This is around, I would say, probably line like 51, 2, something like that. Or even before that, actually, probably in the late 40s. Odysseus says, "May Zeus and all the deathless gods reward you with your heart's desire because you welcomed me so willingly." And Eumaeus, and this is one of, I think, the far fewer times that the poet is using their own voice in the Odyssey, as opposed to the many times this happened in the Iliad. And I wonder what the translation is like, but it says, "And you, Eumaeus, answered, one must honor guests and foreigners and strangers, even those much poorer than oneself. Zeus watches over beggars and guests and strangers. What I have to give is small, but I will give it gladly."
Yeah, and also, this is one of the few times where the poet refers to someone directly, and you.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
this is one of those. It's so much less frequent throughout the Odyssey than it is in the Iliad. I felt like this was happening all the time in the Iliad, and so when this happened at this point in the Odyssey, I was like, "Oh, this again. Okay, we're back to this." Because it just sticks out so much more to me because it happens so much less frequently. And it is followed by such a, thesis statement of this entire poem.
Yeah. Although, this is also off the back of, because last time we saw this, one must honor guests and foreigners and strangers and what have you. This is off the back of a time when this was, not, it's hard to say if it's, not the right decision, but
the Phaeacians?
The Phaeacians. It didn't turn out great for them, right?
No, it didn't. And I think that actually kind of makes it all the more important in a way, because you now have gotten to this point in the poem where you've seen an example of how this goes terribly wrong, and then the poet calls it out to reinforce that message yet again.
I don't know. I guess obviously this feels a little bit, as you said, very on the nose, or as I think you're implying, sort of on the nose. This is
it very much is.
This is what's going on. I'm unsure if we're to take this. I don't know. I'm unsure of how we're supposed to take this.
I'm not sure that there's necessarily a specific message to it. I just find it very, like, very poignant at this moment.
Yes, absolutely. That much I can certainly get behind.
Yeah. Like, I'm not sure that I can, like, completely interpret that moment, but it just, like, is like a beacon shining in my eyes, and I'm like, okay, there's something here. That much I know. It's, I think, a really, like, interesting message. I think what you brought up, that, like, that it is juxtaposed against the example of what happened to Alcinous and Arete, is, like, it's an interesting contrast.
And as I said, right, like, we're presented with many different ways that I guess Zinnia and its like requirements and demands can go, right? We've seen very good ones. We've seen ones in which, the guest has been good, guest has been bad, host has been good, host has been bad, both have been one, both have been the other. And we've watched one that turns out fairly poorly, even when everyone does do the right thing. It gives me a little bit of Odysseus' cynicism, I think, which, and being cynical, I think, does have its negative connotations, and I think we should still be wary of cynicism, but at least in the world of the Odyssey, even approaching something what feels as sacred as Zinnia, being approached with something like cynicism, I don't know. It seems a little bit more correct after seeing everything that Odysseus has gone through.
It serves a purpose. I mean, honestly, I would probably argue that even in the modern day, like, cynicism still very much serves its purpose. It's just a balance. You have to find a balance between cynicism and, I guess, genuine belief. Or I don't know exactly what the other pole of that is necessarily. But I just think it's a balancing act. And it's interesting that we're talking about this now, because I also think, like, I think one of the things that we talk about in this book is, like, his servant Eumaeus, who we now know his name, is really kind of similar. Like, he has this really cynical attitude as to what Odysseus' fate is. And I find it kind of hilarious that he's talking about all of this, like, directly to the person he's talking about. Because you know that it's Odysseus, so this entire time you're like, oh, okay, like, he's telling the guy who he thinks he's dead that he thinks he's dead.
Yeah, and also, if we are to compare this encounter with Eumaeus, with Odysseus's longer encounter with the Phaeacians, Eumaeus has, while he is as welcoming as Alcinous and Arete, he regards Odysseus himself, the person, with more skepticism than Alcinous and Arete seem to. He still takes in Odysseus at the beggar, or the stranger or whatever. But when it comes to, like, Odysseus the person, he recognizes also that he's like, beggars will say anything to get a free meal or a new pair of clothes or what have you.
Yeah, he shares that same cynicism, which I think is just, like, I wonder if it makes Odysseus feel, like, more at home even. He's like, oh god, I'm not the only one who, is questioning people.
Yeah, maybe. And it's possible that he's just gotten that from having known Odysseus, right? That's the way he works. And the way Odysseus talks is famous. It's well known.
Yep. So what we get here is this servant, Eumaeus, is kind of, preparing this food for Odysseus, but at the same time he's talking to him and saying, like, oh yeah, pretty sure my master's dead. These assholes are here eating up all the food, and it's like they have some sense that he's dead. So I believe that fully that he's probably dead. But these guys are awful. I miss I miss my master. He was rich and good. And this was I wrote next to this LOL why, because he talks about, like, my lord is very rich. No others on the mainland or back here in Ithaca, nor 20 all combined possess as much. I will list all of it. Like, he just rattles off this list of all the stuff that Odysseus has. It's such an unnatural, like, conversation.
This whole conversation is very weird.
Yeah, it's a really, like, awkward kind of conversation, because you have this, like, slave just talking about, like, how much he misses his master, how much he's sure that he's dead. All of these people are here. Also, do you want to know all of the stuff my master has? And this gives Odysseus the opportunity to kind of sneakily cut in and be like, who is this guy that you're talking about? Maybe I know him. Maybe I've met him in my many travels.
Yeah, and there, one of the things that I've like circled and outlined a few places, like at line 130, Eumaeus says, "Sir, you also would weave tall tales if you got clothes for it." And put in the side note, like, he's not totally wrong. He's saying this not just about Odysseus, who this makes sense for, but he's also saying about, like, people in general, I guess, that, people are out to get theirs. This is something that Dr. Daniel was talking about when we were commenting on Achilles' attitude, and how, like, it seems like he's looking to get his glory above all things, and this strong sense of individuality isn't just limited, or at least it doesn't seem like it's just limited to heroes, right? Eumaeus has almost certainly encountered other beggars who have said similar things. He's hit Odysseus's wife and son will not trust travelers who claim to bring them news. Tramps always lie to get a meal. They have no cause to tell the truth. And also, Odysseus, a little bit later, quite hilariously says, "I hate like Hades' gates the man who caves to poverty and starts to lie."
Yep.
It's very... It shows how easily Odysseus can just turn on the like his other face, especially off the back of this part where Eumaeus says, "I would prefer to call him Odysseus' brother. I hesitate to call him by his name, stranger. I would prefer to call him brother, even when he was far away, because he loved and cared for me with so much kindness." That's like I don't know exactly what, like, the original Greek is implying when it says, I would rather call him brother, but I suspect this means something like, it's obviously means something very close. And Odysseus, as we'll see, not just with the slave, but with his family members, is quite keen to just... lying is a strong word. Keeping relevant information to himself and replacing it with other information.
Keeping a tight lid on things is, I think, probably how I would put it.
The weirdest part of this whole conversation for me was this incredibly long story that Odysseus tells to Eumaeus. It lasts 5 pages. 1, 2,
it does.
3, 4,
it is
5,
like
5, 6 pages.
It's bizarre.
It's excessive.
It's really excessive. It kind of says to me, though, in a way that, like, he's back in a place of comfort. Like, I know that we've had him tell these, like, really tall tales. This man is spinning so much yarn that he could, like, open a fucking Michael's, which is a craft store, for those of you who are not aware. For all of the people who are crafters who recognize that, you're awesome.
I mean, I know what Michael's is. I'm not a crafter. So.
Not everyone does.
It's true.
It was a pretty obscure joke, but I had to make it because I am a crafter. But yeah, he has spun some serious yarns. He has told some really interesting stories, but this one is, like, it's so long.
Yeah, I don't have many comments on it. I have written in the margins, this is his most elaborate lie.
Yeah.
It's I don't know if there's much more to say about it. I mean, so like, I suspect that there is plenty here to dig into, and we can if we want, I guess. But I can make neither heads or tails of this particular passage. This is a weird passage. There's some things that stand out to me. Odysseus reuses the lie the story that he was set to tell Athena, sort of. He says that he's a Cretan. He's from Crete. He reuses that.
He's got like a pretty like solidly prepared alibi that he likes to go back to.
And there are some things that stand out as like little truths.
This is something he always does in his stories. He lays in like little nuggets of truth. But I think that's kind of something that a lot of people do. Like if you're telling like a story that is mostly just you bullshitting, like you kind of have to connect it and tie it back to things that you actually know about, or else it sounds completely unbelievable.
It's just easier to get a hold of. Like this part where he says, "I do not like farm work or housekeeping or raising children. I liked sailing better and war with spears and arrows, deadly weapons." This seems to track just a little bit. And he also tells, like, we Greeks fought for 9 years, and in the 10th we sacked the town of Priam and sailed home.
That's all true.
Yeah, and he also tells of like much danger at sea. There's a part where I think his ship gets wrecked or something like that.
Yeah, it talks about Zeus, putting a cloud over their ship and
or like line 310,
lightning at it.
In my desperation, Zeus rescued me. He put the sturdy mast into my hands. I clung to it and drifted, propelled by storm winds for 9 days. This is all like there are little elements, but
yeah, we know this by his own previous accounts, to be true, or by other people's previous accounts to be true.
I guess.
Sorry,
go on.
No, please go for it.
I was gonna say, I guess if I were to guess at what the biggest thing that you can take away from a passage like this is we can see a little more clearly how Odysseus builds his stories. A lot of it's a lie, and some of it, like, he fills in the details with things that he's familiar with.
I also think it's a way of kind of cultivating some sort of, I guess at the very least, like, plausible deniability that there is actually a way that he has heard of Odysseus, because a lot of this kind of connects him into those plot lines, like the talking about the war in Troy and stuff like that really kind of ties him back to that place of, and then he gets to do the end. This was where I heard about Odysseus. This king that I stayed with said that he had been a guest there previously. He, first of all, we did kind of skip over a little bit of this conversation right before this really long story is told that I think is actually really important, where Odysseus replies to Eumaeus's like cynicism by saying, "I am telling you this and you can be certain of it. Odysseus will come back and revenge will be had." Period. Like, and so he kind of has to connect back to this idea that he has any fucking idea what he's talking about.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think
this serves that purpose.
He's establishing himself with some credibility about Odysseus. However, after he finishes telling his tale, which seems to be designed to build his own credibility, Eumaeus,
he's having no part of it.
Exactly. The poet refers to Eumaeus again in second person. Eumaeus, you replied, "Poor guest, your tale of woe is very moving but pointless. I will not believe a word about Odysseus. Why do you stoop to these silly lies?" As I keep saying, my mind keeps going back to book 9 of the Iliad, where Dr. Joel Christensen said that there may be some greater design to Odysseus's apparent failure to move the needle with Achilles, and I guess I wonder that here as well. But I can't imagine what he is doing aside from perhaps bringing the subject of himself to the conversation.
I think, and this is me speculating as usual, as I love to do, I think it's a kind of like multiple folds purpose, in terms of trying to suss out how this person feels about him, felt about him, will feel about him coming back. And also kind of planting that seed. So I honestly, there's part of me that like, and this is complete like headcanon, that believes that Odysseus is doing this so that when Eumaeus finally realizes that it's him, he'll have this like holy fuck moment.
Yeah, it could be.
That is absolute pure speculation. I think my first kind of idea about it being something to suss out Eumaeus is there's probably at least some kind of reason to be able to suggest that. But the second part is definitely just me being like, wouldn't it be fucking hilarious if this is just Odysseus's way of like planting that aha moment in there? It's like but it was you, the old man was you the whole time. Oh my god. And you said that thing. So yeah, I think there could be many reasons for it. I think it's another one of those passages that is like so long and you can't figure out why, but there's usually some kind of reason for that, even if it's just kind of an introductory thing or it's not maybe perhaps the most important or impactful reason, but like it's there. There's a reason it's there. And yeah, Eumaeus is just like, I don't believe any of this.
Again, I guess we can contrast it with Alcinous and Eurydice' response to Odysseus's
like,
own
wow,
story, which
cool
itself was
story,
very long.
Man.
I guess I don't know if we really know if they bought all of it, but off the back of such a long story, and Eumaeus is just able to be like, nah, you're pulling a fast one on me.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, the conversation does continue to be, like, really kind of awkward to me, at least. Because Eumaeus kind of goes into, like, yeah, I don't really trust anyone anymore because this one guy, stayed here and fooled me with his lies. He recounts that he'd seen Odysseus, with Idomeneus in Crete, repairing ships that storms had wrecked. And this guy promises him that Odysseus will come back that summer, I think. And he doesn't, and so he's just like, yeah, this is bullshit, and I'm not going to believe anyone who tells me, like, any news about my master anymore, because all of them are lying. And then he says, I'll be kind to you, old man, not for your stories, but in fear of Zeus, the god of strangers, and because I feel pity for you. Which, again, that's cynicism. Holy crap.
Yeah, it is a bit cynical. Yeah.
And then it's matched by Odysseus, who then says,
"You are too skeptical.
I see you're not going to trust. You're too skeptical. I see you're not going to trust me." I'm just going to read this out because may the gods of Mount Olympus be our witness that if your master ever comes back home to this house, you will give me clothes to wear and help me to Dulichium.
Seems about right.
I want to go there. But if he does not arrive and I am wrong, your slaves can drive me over the cliff tops, so no other beggar tries to trick you. What?
It's such a over the top
it's so dramatic.
Which Euaemon sort of calls him on by saying, "Oh yeah, people would think that would be great if they heard that I just killed a beggar.
I invite this guy this beggar into my place and then murder him."
Yeah, so yeah, this is kind of an uncomfortable conversation. Odysseus, yeah, I don't know. That's
it made me uncomfortable. I was just like, awkward.
Yeah, and again,
this is kind of where the conversation ends, because then all the herdsmen just come back in with all the pigs and stuff.
Yeah, it feels as though Euaemon is honoring Xenia for its own sake, regardless of who's there. I suspect that
it feels like he's going through the motions.
Yes, mostly. Odysseus manages to convince him to give him clothes, give him something warm to wear with a nice tale, also of Odysseus. And Euaemon is he's not like totally like super cynical, such that like he won't allow himself to enjoy this story, or he's like, oh, what a splendid tale, I will give you like something to wear for the night. So it's not like completely, all right, did this thing, get out, like he's clearly willing to engage with him, despite
the
this.
The feeling that I get from it is like Odysseus has been gone for such a long time, and they seem to have had a really good rapport. That this guy is like super depressed that he's been gone for a long time, but has accepted the fact that he's dead. And this old guy comes and starts talking about his old master, and he's just like, oh man, he's totally dead. But like, yeah, sure, I'll take you in. I'll listen to your story. You seem you seem fine. He's going through the motions, but he's also just like, I have nothing better to do. Like, all of these stupid suitors are eating up all of our stuff, and you at least seem a decent fellow. And he'll take the amusement. And in some ways, I think it might even kind of start poking at the back of his mind that, like, why is Odysseus coming up so much now?
I mean, he thinks he knows why Odysseus is coming up so much, because people who bring news of Odysseus are usually looking for something.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, and then go for it.
Oh no, it's drifting. The thought is, how when you have a thought that you have a hold of, and then it goes away, you get it back again, and then it goes away again.
Yep.
Oh, okay, that's the thought. So there are also I just got back. So there's also like a nifty little, I guess if you want to draw a parallel between this exchange and Nestor's, or Telemachus's visit with Nestor, where, or one of the things that might happen with a stranger is that you've welcomed in a god. Eumaeus has done something very similar. Odysseus is not a god, but he is a person of special interest. This at least reinforces that aspect of what you might expect of Xenia, which is that you never know who you're helping.
He's doing it like I think you can still do something genuinely, but also kind of be going through the motions with it. Yeah. Like, I feel like his welcome to Odysseus and that act of Xenia is actually genuine. It just seems like he's acting on routine. It doesn't seem like his heart is truly in it, just because like things are so dismal.
And there's also an aspect, like, the act is almost as important as the intent. I'm unsure of, I can't even remember who wrote this. I learned a bit about this in when I was studying philosophy in college. But in terms of morality, if there's someone who this was, I suspect this was by Aristotle, although I can't totally remember because it's been so long. But basically, if there is an immoral person or a bad person, what you would do, or what you should do, is have them follow around someone who is good and imitate them. Just do what they do until that becomes your habit, and then
you can you make it.
Basically, a little bit more extensive than that. Like, you're faking it with the intent of learning, like how to be a good person, but just the action itself, I think carries a fair bit of significance, even if, as you said, like, your heart isn't totally in it.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I mean, this has kind of brought us, right to the end of the book, which I find to be super cute, because Eumaeus, makes him a bed beside the fire and tucks him in to like his super thick extra cloak for really bad weather, and they all go to sleep, except for, he and the younger, I think, servants kind of all go to sleep in that area by the fire, and Eumaeus separates himself from all of them because he doesn't want to sleep away from the piggies.
Yeah,
he's protective of his piggies. And takes a sharpened knife off with him and goes out, and they will spend the night that way. with a lot more to come.
Yeah, and I guess one more thing. This passage just recently stood out to me as I'm reading it. Odysseus was glad the slave took good care of his absent master's things. This is in the last stanza.
Yep.
And this, of course, will sharply contrast with how some people aren't taking good care of his things. It's important to him that his stuff is
then definitely that little bit of foreshadowing at what awaits him, in his actual home, as you mentioned, with the people who not only have not been taking care of the things, but have been actively basically taking them, in concert with these suitors. So, yeah, this is where book 14 leaves us. Any other final thoughts?
None particularly. Aside from, of course, everyone should listen to Dr. Daniel's tag.
Yes. I was just about to get to that because I was going to say we'll leave our final thoughts with Dr. Daniel, who I'm sure will have some really interesting insights and,
so much pressure.
No pressure. Anything that he talks about is always amazing.
Yeah.
Like every single tag that we, have had the opportunity to listen to so far has really added so much to how I think about, reading these books and delving into them with you. So no pressure at all. Just I'm hyping up our resident amazing expert and our most special guest, as I have called him before, because he's truly fantastic to have conversations with over this. So, on that note, however, we will leave you all with Dr. Jan's thoughts and see you soon.
Hello everybody, my name is Daniel, otherwise known as Dr. Daniel, Dr. Dan, or the Dancing Grad, and I'm here to offer some thoughts on Wriste and Llama's conversation about the Odyssey, books 13 and 14. First off, regarding the two tricksters title of book 13, Llama and Wriste spent a lot of time talking about Athena as the goddess of wisdom, but also the goddess of craftiness, and her characterization here as a trickster. The craftiness and trickery of the other trickster, Odysseus, is highlighted by none other than Athena herself around line 291 or so. Quote, "To outwit you, Odysseus, in all your tricks, a person or a god would need to be an expert at deceit. You clever rascal, so duplicitous, so talented at lying. You love fiction and tricks so deeply, you refuse to stop even in your own land." End quote. However, there is a linguistic feature of the ancient Greek that I think lends some power to the characterization of Athena as a trickster here, one that I think actually gets kind of lost in Emily Wilson's translation. We've discussed the idea of epithets before, these descriptors or modifiers for a person's name or for an area that encapsulates some sort of essential quality about that person or that area. We had ruddy-haired Menelaos, we had Achilles swift with respect to his feet, and we also have Athena, the gleaming-eyed goddess, or gleaming-eyed Athena. In Greek, the adjective is glaukopis, gleaming-eyed. And in Book 13, the adjective glaukopis actually shows up 7 times for Athena, which out of the 24 books of the Odyssey is the most amount of times that it shows up within one book. Book 13 is tied with books 1 and 3 for the number of times that the adjective glaukopis, or gleaming-eyed, appears for the goddess Athena. To my mind, there are 2 different ways in which we can interpret gleaming eyes, both of which square with Athena's characterization, respectively in the Iliad and the Odyssey. Gleaming eyes can indicate a fierce glare, such as we would expect of Athena in the Iliad. However, gleaming eyes can also not necessarily have that focus energy and have more of the sense of a twinkle in the eye. The kind of twinkle we can expect in somebody's eye if they are playing some sort of a trick or winking at a certain situation. So I think that the capaciousness of that epithet, glaukopis Athena, gleaming-eyed Athena, lends some weight to Emily Wilson's characterization of this book as the two tricksters chapter, even though she doesn't necessarily take advantage of the capaciousness of glaukopis. For example, right before the speech that I quoted earlier, Emily Wilson writes, at his words, at Odysseus' words, Athena smiled into his eyes. However, in the Greek goes hos phatome de sen de theaglaukopis Athene, thus he spoke, and the gleaming-eyed goddess Athena smiled. Perhaps the translation into his eyes emphasizes the reception of the gleamingness or the light from Athena's eyes by Odysseus, but I think it's a missed opportunity to highlight this very important epithet and the ways in which it can be interpreted. Next, towards the end of the book, Llama pointed out how Athena, seemingly out of nowhere, procures this wand that she uses to change Odysseus' appearance. This is not the last time that we're going to see this wand, however. It makes another appearance in Book 16, when Athena uses this wand to restore Odysseus' appearance as a younger person. The term for the wand in ancient Greek is rhabdos, and the last time that a wand featured prominently into the story was back in Book 10 with Circe. I really don't know what to make of this, and I thought I would bring it up in case other people had some thoughts. Why would Athena and Circe be drawn together in this way by using the same kind of a prop, namely a magic wand? What kind of qualities do both possess, or how do they factor into the story in such a way as to make them, putting them on the same level, using the same kind of prop? Book 14 then focuses on the character of Eumaeus, the swineherd of Odysseus, who's been loyal to him this entire time. One quick narrative note about Eumaeus actually makes him a little bit more akin to Patroclus in the Iliad. The narrator of the Odyssey actually addresses Eumaeus directly, at least twice in this book. First around line 55 or so, and you, Eumaeus, answered, and then again at about line 155 or so, 165 or so, you answered him, swineherd Eumaeus. The reasons for the direct address here are open to interpretation. With Patroclus, I suggested that the direct address indicates a sort of special interest in the character and an engendering of sympathy with the audience. Maybe we are to sympathize with Eumaeus as well, this long-suffering slave who is trying to hold down the fort while his master is away. In the course of talking about Eumaeus and the other slaves of the household, it was brought up, I think, by Wriste, that often these slaves are called slave boys or slave girls, and there was discussion about whether this indicated anything about their ages. However, the term boys or girls for slaves is not actually an indicator of age, and it requires a little bit of cultural context to understand. In the ancient world, the term child was applied both to actual offspring of parents and also to slaves. The term was applied to slaves regardless of the slaves' ages, whether they were young or they were old. The reason for this has to do with social power, or relative lack thereof. Children of a household were placed under the complete legal power of the head of the household, often termed the Kyrios, or the male head of the household. Slaves, similarly, were under the sway of the head of the household, having as much or as little agency and social power as children did. So when you see the term slave boy, or slave girl, or child referring to a slave in the translation of an ancient text, it doesn't necessarily have to do with the actual age of the slave in question, just about their relative lack of social power compared to their master or the head of the household. Finally, there was a question when Eumaeus was talking about Odysseus about how the ancient Greek actually looked when Eumaeus was talking about calling Odysseus a brother rather than a master. Emily Wilson's translation reads as follows, from Book 14, around line 142 or so. I grieve less for my own family than for Odysseus. I miss him so. I hesitate to call him by his name, stranger. I would prefer to call him brother, even when he is far away, because he loved and cared for me with so much kindness. The ancient Greek for the last few lines reads as follows, at Book 14, lines 145 through 147. Ton menegono xene kaiu pareont onomas den aideomai, perigar mephile kai kede tothumo, alamin atheion kaleo kai nosphin eonta. A literal translation, O stranger, I shrink away from naming him, even though he's not here, for he really loved me, peri ethile, and he cared for me in his soul. But I call him atheion is the Greek adjective here, and I'll talk more about that in a second. I call him atheion even though he is far away. The adjective atheos is defined in the dictionary as follows: trusty, honored, a term of address used to express respect. I'm pretty sure that it's this adjective that Emily Wilson is using to translate the term brother. And I think her justification for it actually comes from the Iliad, Book 6, towards the very end, where Paris actually uses this term atheos to address his brother, Hector. The adjective in question, though, especially according to its dictionary definition, seems to set up a power hierarchy, wherein the person who addresses somebody else as atheos is putting them up sort of higher on a pedestal. When Paris uses the term, he basically uses it to introduce an apology for not acting as quickly as Hector had commanded him to. So while I think the translation brother does have some weight to it, there's still an element of respect and a power differential in using the term atheos that using just the term brother doesn't necessarily get across. In any case, that's about all I have, so with that, I'm going to toss it back to Llama and Wriste.
Thank you so much, Dr. Daniel, and thank you once again, dear listener, for tuning in. We hope you've enjoyed our discussion as well as Dr. Daniel's wonderfully informative expert opinions. We also hope you'll take the opportunity to continue reading along with us, since there is still plenty to love about these stories. Keep an eye out for future episodes by following us on Twitter at Homer_bound, or wherever you happen to be listening to us right now. We're looking forward to seeing you for the next episode, but until next time, take care and thank you for joining us for this episode of Homer Bound.